Welcome to the Integrated Schools Podcast. I'm Andrew, a white dad from Denver.
And I'm Val, a black mom from North Carolina.
And this is Identity and Purpose with Byron Sanders. Val, we got a good one today. A friend of yours you have not missed yet. Every friend you've brought on the podcast has been spectacular.
They are interesting people.
Yeah.
I appreciate Byron for coming on. We met through some professional connections and became quick friends. I think part of it is because we share a birthday month. So obviously
you must be close, right?
That is a special connection there. But I have always really respected Byron, the work that he does, the way he approaches the world, and the way he's trying to do to impact the community around him.
And he's done a ton of things. He's working for a healthcare company. He is on the school board in Dallas. But I think the work of his that really made me excited to talk to him for the podcast was a job he recently left at an organization called Big Thought that really is focused on creating learning experiences outside of just the traditional classroom. So after school programs, before school programs, then also kind of push in or pull out programs in schools.
And I think that is important to us because we recognize that in this moment, we are going to need as many entities as possible to support our young children for the values that we have that bring people together across difference and show them what's possible in a good way in the world.
Yeah, I think one of the things about Big Thought, they came up with this creator archetype, and he'll explain that in the episode. But just this idea of kind of the skills and the tools that we want kids to have that maybe there's not space for in our current education system, that Big Thought was really focused on providing in those sort of third spaces. And I think particularly in this time where we're looking at the federal government pulling back support for things that we think are valuable in schools, we look at teachers being under attack. Where can we turn to these third spaces and try to get some of those skills instilled in our kids, even if the public education system isn't able to do that in this moment?
Yeah, I think what is a good reminder is that there are caring adults in every industry who want to support the growth and development of our young people. And so if we expand our community and recognize there are many entities and people who care about young children and the world we're trying to create for and with them, I think that's really important. And I think what connects both of us to Byron, even though he's in a slightly different field, is our recognition that our identity is tied to our purpose and the impact that we want to make.
His journey to sort of finding his own identity, which is a really powerful story that we'll hear in the conversation, coming to terms with his past and figuring out not just what he wanted to run away from, but what he wanted to run towards is such a powerful story and really drives his purpose and why, even through the various professional activities he's engaged in, there's been this thread underneath of how do I pour back into my community and serve.
And it's funny, I realize that you and I share that run too. We have not been able to escape this work, even if we tried. True. So I feel kinship in that way.
Absolutely. Shall we take a listen to Byron?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right.
Byron Sanders, I'm here in Dallas, 20 years in education in multiple different capacities, from starting a tutoring company, it was called Group Excellence, it's fantastic, all the way to fast forward. I was recently elected to the Dallas Independent School District Board of Trustees after 7 years of having been the CEO of Big Thought, which is one of the most fantastic nonprofit organizations in the country. Youth development, helping build 21st century skills, specializing in really elevating the necessity for us to build real learning experiences outside of just the traditional classroom. So bottom line is, man, been at this for a long time.
Yeah.
A lot of different seats. And as always, I care about people, my family, and my ancestors with me. So yeah, excited to be here with y'all.
Thank you. Yeah, you've done some work in healthcare. You've done work in banking. Covered a whole lot of ground. It seems like there's been a focus on making a difference for the most marginalized, for closing the opportunity gap. Why?
Yeah.
Like, who poured that into you? Why do you care about that?
Man, so my first model was my mother. 40-year educator. She retired, and I called her today. Actually, she called me today. Today's my birthday, so mom called me.
Hey, happy birthday.
Birthday!
Yeah. But yeah, my mom, she was my first teacher role model. And she's always been service oriented. We would have kids always over our house. And, you know, my mom to this day is exactly that same human being. She retired and she's doing the same thing that a lot of teachers who retired do, which is teach. That's where I learned, probably without even explicit lessons, that you're supposed to live life with an eye toward an impact for other people. Biggest thing that really entrenched that, though, was, and I know we're getting deep real quick, but
that's how we like to roll.
Yes.
So I did not know who I was for a long time. And my whole identity, my whole, like, you know, worldview was shaped off of trying not to be something. So I was trying not to be like my dad. I grew up in a household where there's domestic violence. And so everything that he was, I know it sounds weird to say I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the perspective that I was blessed to have, which is you can either repeat the things that you see, or you can be like, nah, that ain't gonna be me. So that pushed me in a really positive place, because I was literally running from negativity. But what that did was I was only somebody relative to something negative, and I had no space, place, or instinct to figure out who I was. What was my purpose? What was my identity? What was my mission? And so I actually built a really deep skill on serving, being involved, being engaged. But my motivations was, I did it because every time I was at practice or rehearsal or the track meet or the football game or something like that, we weren't at home. And if we weren't at home, mom was safe. That's why I did it. And then I would not only had to go and do something, but I had to go and do it great, because I needed a good report card or a sticker or a trophy or something that I could come home, run inside, and be like, Dad, look what I got. Look what I got. Aren't you happy? Isn't this cool? Isn't this funny? Because if I could do that, then mom was safe. I noticed Dad's in a good mood, mom's safe. These were things that I was carrying with me since I was 6 years old. So while that did allow me to show up as the happy, gregarious, like to make people laugh, you know, just super extroverted kid who does great in school and everything else, because it was coming from trauma that I had not resolved, it is possible to swing that pendulum too far, even in a good direction. And for me, I ended up being one of those people who was almost manically doing good without any discernment on, should I be involved in this? Should I do what? Who is this actually helping? Right? Nah, I'm a fixer. I've been fixing all my life. That needs fixing. I'm about to go fix it. Should you? I don't know. That's immaterial, but it's about to get fixed.
Right.
So I'm at college. These have been my habits. I joined a fraternity because I was about to fix that too. And this fraternity, some of the practices were a little toe up from the flow up. And I would say illegitimate, especially the intake process, the pledging process. It was some wild things we were doing. And I was like, all right, so here's what I'm going to do. Bet. I'm going to go undercover. I'm going to get my letters. I'm going to come through. They ain't going to say, you can't do it. It was like, nah, I'm on the inside. I got mine, and this is why we're going to change it. Then I'm going to go recruit a bunch of other guys. They're going to come in, and then we're going to all vote. It'll be like this dramatic moment. There'll be like music playing in the background. It's like, yeah, it's our chapter now. We going legit. That's how it played out in my mind. That is not what actually ended up happening. What happened was near tragedy. We almost took a young man's life. And I say we because I was complicit in that. After I'd gotten my letters, I recruited a couple of guys. One of these guys to this day is one of my best friends. And at the time, one of the other guys was a deeply good friend. They trusted me, which is one of the reasons why they said, okay, we'll go through this process. And he almost died, man. Drank too much water one night and was in the hospital ER. They thought they thought he could die. By the grace of God, he survived. What do you think happened to everybody who was involved in that? Zero tolerance. It was national news, expelled. So here I am, the kid who had modeled my life off of doing everything right. Now I'm expelled, facing potential charges. And I'd been to the principal's office once in my life.
Right.
And so now I fell into a very deep depression because I was like, yo, my dad was a college dropout and an abuser. Here I am, expelled and a hazer. And I saw those things as being the exact same. And I was like, I cannot escape this. So there was a moment where I actually thought, maybe I should just take myself off the planet because I'm not trying to hurt nobody anymore. And this shame is too much. And that's when Earl Johnson stepped in. Earl Johnson was at the time the vice president, I believe, of enrollment and admissions with the University of Tulsa. And when no one else would give me a second chance, that man did. I ended up getting a chance to go to the University of Tulsa as an expelled student off of an exception that he chose to push for just to give me a choice. And previously, again, remember, I'm the Midas touch kid. If I want to fix it, it gets fixed. I'd had a deeply humbling process, and I was brought to a place where the only way that I got another chance was through the grace and participation and trust of another person. And I couldn't have seen it any other way. It had always been like that, but I thought I was dope. And that lesson has shaped my worldview ever since. So the reason why I believe so deeply in community work, the reason why I believe so deeply in spending every day to create the pathway or bridge from somebody's today to seeing their best selves is because I had it happen for me. And I don't know of a better tool than education. And that's why, you know, of all the different things that I do, education is always going to be core to some of that work. Even with the work that I'm doing now in healthcare professionally, I'm such an addict that I was like, and now I'll go run for school board.
I know. When I saw that, I was like, wait, what?
As I'm launching a major enterprise, you know, but I was like, what? Sure. No. It makes sense. It makes so much sense, Val. Yeah. That's how the perspective came about. And that's why I do what I do.
So you did say we're going to get deep real quick, and that we've been deep pretty quickly, but we've never been that deep pretty quickly. That was really fast. So much to unpack there. So did you imagine yourself being an Earl Johnson in these roles?
That's exactly what I did. The biggest thing that Earl taught me actually was that my capacity to be an Earl Johnson for somebody meant that I had to understand my why. And when somebody asked me, what's the greatest advice that I can give to anybody professionally, relationship, whatever, get to know who you are and why you exist. Earl Johnson went through that process 20 years before he ever met me. He was going to the NFL. He had done all his things right at school. He had a dream of playing in the NFL. So he graduated from the University of Tulsa, got drafted by the Steelers. Then he gets hurt. And the kind of hurt that eventually ended his career prematurely. And so now he's like, you know, this was the dream. Now the dream's not even possible. But he did something that is so illustrative of what I think we should all do, which is instead of like, okay, what do I do now? Let me find the next job. Let me just reflexively snap to something. He kind of paused, sat in it, and was like, well, why did I want to do any of that in the first place? And he realized it was to be a role model. It was to be a lighthouse for somebody's vision of themselves. And, you know, to help somebody know that they can go out and achieve, right? So he was doing that as a symbol for the people that he came from, the community that he came from, and the people that he knew and loved. And so they could see, yo, if I can do it, you can too. So he's like, all right, where else can I do that then? And then he came back, the place where he saw he could best live out that purpose was in college admissions. So he came back and he started off as admissions counselor at the University of Tulsa. And 20 years later, when there was this little kid from Oak Cliff, DeSoto, Pleasant Grove, Southern Dallas, who needed somebody to hear his story and not just cast him away, Earl specifically, uniquely was that person. And I had been rejected from many other institutions that I was trying to get back into. He's the only one who heard my story. Right. And so because he found his identity and his purpose, he was in the position to have the kind of collision that I needed in order to save my life. And so that was the lesson I took from that. So I have my mission statement. I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. And even though you look at my resume, you're like, what is this dude doing with his life?
No, not at all.
I don't think so.
No.
Thank y'all.
Yeah.
No.
Every single one of those steps has actually made sense because they're mission aligned.
Yeah.
He helped me know that I needed to find my mission.
He helped you find the positive version of who you wanted to be, to strive for, as opposed to the negative version of who you didn't want to be that you were running from for so long.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
That's beautiful.
I want to shift a little bit from all of your positions in education. Like, what are you seeing right now? What alarms you right now? What encourages you right now?
Yeah.
Where do you find hope right now?
Now that is a question, friend. You know what I find hope in? I find hope in my imagination. And I mean that without the butterflies, daffodils, because we're in some pretty tough times. No doubt. This is not going to be a surprise to anybody listening. I know it ain't a surprise to you guys. I'm seeing a startling, shocking speed of the dissolution of things that I was raised to adore. The Civil Rights Movement, right? The Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act that came out of the Freedom Rides and the sit-ins and the Children's Crusade, right? Like all of that stuff. And it is literally vaporizing before our very eyes. And it hasn't taken a long time.
No,
Right.
It's been fast.
It's been real fast.
Yeah.
And then the other problem that we're having is we are getting to a place where we literally can't talk about things that actually literally happen. We're not even talking about having a subjective opinion about things that
Right.
we're getting to a place where we can't even say this thing happened.
Yep.
That is scary to me and should be scary to a lot of people. My hope, though, comes from the fact that I had things that I was raised on that I was proud about. And those things were the culmination of years and years of blood, sweat, tears, and people who had never even seen that good things were possible for themselves and people who looked like them and came from their communities. All they had was their radical imagination. That I can go from being an enslaved person to a world where we're sitting here on a podcast, first of all, on a box that talks to you, then there's another person sitting way away. That's the first thing.
Right.
But that we're free. I got a house. I'm sitting in my house. My kids are getting a phenomenal education. That is the wildest dreams of the people that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So what we have to fight against today in order to make sure that people have access to real opportunity, no matter what race, creed, religion, ability a person is, gender, sexual identity, right? The fact that we're fighting for that world, it's almost light work compared to what a lot of our ancestors went through. So that's the thing that gives me hope. If they could do it, who am I to be like, oh, woe is me.
This is too
And the
much.
world ahead of us is just insurmountable. It's just not true. So if the pendulum can swing in the direction that we don't want it to go, Lord knows it can swing back. And I can't say that it can't because we've seen people do it. So that's what gives me hope. But that is what I'm seeing. The last thing I'll say on this too. Another thing that I'm seeing is, to get even more specific, we're in a crisis of men and boys right now. Women's revolution, women's rights, especially the momentum that we really got going around the 60s, 70s, it created a more expansive definition of what being a woman is, which is great. That's what we needed. I no longer only have to be a nurse or a teacher or a homemaker. Right. Those are phenomenal things. And I can be whatever else I want to be too. I can have my own bank account.
That's right. My own credit card.
It's wild.
A credit card.
I got my own credit card.
Right.
This is so crazy that we're talking about a living memory of color pictures where that wasn't the case. So that happens, which also means I don't only have to be married. I can be divorced. I don't have to get married at all, right? Like I can live. I can be outside without a man on my arm or something.
I could be outside.
I can be outside. I can be outside, right? With a T and then two S's too. I can be outside and outside. And at the same time that the definition of a woman grew, the definition of a man stayed very small, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And not that men are small, just who we can be was small. Okay, if I'm not the main bacon earner, then what am I? Or, okay, I am struggling mentally right now. I'm struggling emotionally right now. But I'm also a man, which means the box says I can't go and ask anybody for help. I don't know how to build friends because that would mean that I need them. And I'm a man. I don't need any goddamn thing, right? Like, so that is our world. We can only do these jobs.
Right.
So Bell Hooks put it best. She said, I'm surprised we had a revolution. Men, where's y'all's? Because y'all seem okay with trying to cling for this very small definition of your humanity. And because of that, and seeing the world move so far beyond what that used to be, we are struggling. We're in a void. We're trying to find our identity. And the people who are filling in the space, because we're not talking about it, we're not being explicit about what masculinity actually is and what a positive reflection could be at a broad systemic level. Because we're not filling in that space, it's like Mad Libs. Some craziness is coming in and filling the blanks.
Right.
The red pills, the manosphere, all of that extra stuff. And for the first time, I saw a stat that showed that there's fewer boys today who believe that a woman should be paid the same amount for the same work and that should even be able to work outside the house. There's fewer boys who believe that than 5 years ago for the first time in recent history. That's a problem that's scary. We gotta fix it. Gotta start to build systems that speak to manness and adjusting to the kind of reality. Richard Reeves of Boys and Men should be required reading for anybody in education, anybody in work that has to do with boys or men, which is gonna be everywhere.
Right.
We should all be reading this, and we actually should be looking at policy solutions the same way that we started to get smart about how are we going to create spaces for women to get into STEM, into the workforce. How are we supporting them? We actually need to recalibrate and make sure that while we keep those things going, don't stop them.
Right.
We need to help men figure out their place in the world today, because the thing that happens when women don't know where their place in the world is we survive. But men don't know where their place in the world is. We burn things down.
It's ugly fast.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked about boys on the show. I think you're giving us some things to really push on. I think what you're offering us today are different angles to think about how we even understand the young people who are in our school systems to begin with, and the ways in which they are being served or may not be served, and how all of the spaces that our children are in, we should be thinking about and considering these things. And so you are currently not a teacher, you're currently not working in schools, but you care deeply about these issues. Why do you care at this point, right? You've made it through, you've made a positive impact. Many people can say you've done enough.
You have another job and you decided to also become a school board member.
Of both a higher ed institution and one of the largest school districts in the country. So why do you still care?
Ooh. Now that is an interesting question. You can't unsee things. Times where I feel most helpless is when all I can do is sit by and watch. I have to be in the fight. And that's not everybody's ministry. I understand that, right? And it shouldn't be. But as you can tell, I get passionate about stuff. And if you don't know, just ask my wife. And these tangents can go long, as you can probably also tell. My belief is too strong that I don't think that the work that we have been doing is in vain. I actually think that my imagination can become a reality. And one of the things that I feel I have gifts in is to connect with people, to tell stories that help people understand maybe the root of the issue, and that we can have a systemic and strategic solution to those kinds of things. And that it's not all charts and graphs, and that there's soul in it. That is a gift that I have. And I also believe that every gift is an assignment. Every blessing is a responsibility. If I would only accept the gift part and not the assignment part, then I feel like I am, going back to that mission, doing Earl Johnson's legacy a radical disservice. So that's why I had to get back into it. And I believe that education is not just a space for student achievement in how we talk about it. I believe it is a place for identity shaping. I believe it is a place for purpose discovery. I believe it is a place where kids learn how to fight in a positive way and what to fight for. I believe it's a place where kids learn how to love, you know what I mean? And learn how to receive love. And I know it feels weird to talk about stuff like this when we're talking about large school systems. I get it. But I think precisely because we don't talk about stuff like this, and we don't actually incorporate things like purpose and identity into the model, a lot of people miss out on the what to what end part, the what for part. Why am I here? And when you look at our boys of color, when you look at our low-income communities, many of our young people struggle, obviously, because of there's an imbalance in resources, right? But one of the most compelling things that I ever saw was that the single greatest predictor on whether a person is going to be able to have positive life outcomes, thriving, escape the cycles of poverty, is whether they felt like they had purpose or not. So often we're like, okay, move from this instructional method to this instructional method. Those things matter because there's results there, right? But honestly, truly, human beings been learning for thousands of years.
Right.
We've been building stuff for thousands of years. Do I believe that the learning matters to me? Do I believe that it's connected to my thriving both today and tomorrow? You can't just simply tell somebody who's living under duress, hey, keep your head down, pay attention, and in 12 years, this is going to really, really pay off for you.
That algebra equation you just learned is going to totally save you. Right?
Bro, I promise you, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Do you understand what I'm saying, young man?
This is going to get you out. This is going to get you out. Just give it time.
Yeah.
Yeah. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the
I haven't even heard that word since
my brother.
the 90s.
Y'all don't hear me
Since
though.
the 90s.
Okay, the powerhouse of the cell. What's up? Why does any of this matter to me? We don't do well about the sense making. And there's research that suggests that is a key part that we're missing at all levels and all socioeconomic levels. I think we would actually have better outcomes, and we would see a better culture shift if we actually felt like that was part of learning. It's gotten a little bit more difficult to do these days because now we are ideologically constrained, especially in Texas and places like it. But there's ways to do it. But we got to bring identity shaping, purpose finding into our school models in a material way.
Yeah.
So what role would community and specifically interracial communities play in that purpose and identity and that sense making?
The reason why I was able to thrive at Green Hill, which is a private school on the north side of town, where it was mostly white people and rich people, and I'm neither, is because of the education, the grounding that I got in my culture, my identity at Adele Turner in Oak Cliff, where I came from. Every day was Black History Month, felt like. They found ways to loop our history and culture in positive ways to dang near every assignment. That stayed with me. And in times where I started to question who I was, all I needed was a little reminder. It's like, no, remember, yes, you are Black and you are smart. Those things are not mutually exclusive.
Mhm.
You know?
It would have been easy to fall into that belief based on the messages you're receiving at this largely white and wealthy school
100%.
without
That's right.
the foundation that was instilled in
That's
you.
right. Man,
Right.
that's it.
Mhm.
And so community matters a lot because, one, that's where people are who are not your teacher. And I think that's actually really important. It's important to have teachers, but it's important to have those supplemental voices to continually
Mhm.
motivate you, encourage you, allow you to see a version of yourself, like a walking billboard of something that you could be that you might not have known before, right? That exposure, that discovery takes place. So those people matter.
Right.
It also matters because then out in community, you get to contextualize the learning that's happening. And that contextualized learning oftentimes involves the backdrop of your culture and your identity. Again, all of this stuff is happening at the same time. So, algebra is algebra. Algebra is super algebra if I understand the references that are in the information, right?
Right.
That's why we bring hip hop and urban references, things. Everybody's like, oh, yeah, I know that one. I'm interested.
Right.
Let's
Now I
let's
see why this matters to me. Now I see why I should care.
engaged, right? And in a country where race and ethnicity has been so ingrained into how we tell our stories, how we show up, how we identify, to depopulate the education space with those markers makes the learning feel inauthentic.
Right.
And it makes it feel like the children are being deliberately either lied to or told partial truths. Kids pick up on that stuff.
Right.
And in a world where you're having folks say, you can't talk about that, isn't it wild that we can't talk about Black history in an all-Black school? It's wild that we can't talk about the Latino contributions to society in like a 99% Latino elementary. And we specifically can't because we're told you don't do that because it makes some people uncomfortable. Who?
Right. Right.
They're not here to be uncomfortable.
Right.
Who specifically doesn't want me to talk about me? That's how crazy it is that this is happening, right? So that's why we have to have the opportunity to bring culturally proficient pedagogy and culturally proficient curriculum and materials and culturally proficient experiences into our schools. Because otherwise, it just feels like you lying.
I didn't mean to laugh, but it's true. I wanted to ask Andrew a question. I'm just curious, Andrew, do you have any idea why white folks don't want Black folks and Latino folks in their predominantly Black and Latino schools to talk about their own culture and identity?
I mean,
He gets asked all the white people questions. Like,
No,
that's
listen.
why I'm
Yeah.
here.
yeah.
That's why I'm here. I mean, some part of it is just like if you teach Black kids Black history, if you teach Latino kids Latino history, you are empowering them to know that they are more powerful than they think they are. That is like a threat to the power structure. That if you understand the history, the ways that Black people were crucial to the creation of the country to where we are right now, then you have to acknowledge that they will continue to be crucial to the ongoing future of the country, and that feels scary.
Andrew, why does it feel scary? That's the part that I actually because I understand exactly them recognizing that we feel empowered. Why does that translate as fear?
So, there's probably an onion here with a lot of layers to peel back on that. And I think one piece is, I think white supremacy is based on a like zero sum lie that if somebody else has more, then I will have to have less. That like the way we maintain a hierarchy of human value is by assuming that the pie is fixed. And so if you get more pie, that means I have to have less. I think there is some fear that if you grapple with the history of abuse perpetuated by white folks, it's easy to assume that if if folks of color get enough power, that there will be some desire for revenge or some desire to like reenact those same power structures back on white folks.
Yeah, we'll flip the script.
We're just trying to mind our business, truly.
For sure.
And that's
for
the
sure.
part that man, Val, like, I was like, man, what will it take for white people to know, and not all white people, y'all know,
Yeah, of course.
to know we just trying to live.
That's
We just
it.
trying to mind our business.
That's it.
Let me be.
Yeah.
That's literally, I'm just trying to mind my business.
I think the other thing, and it actually comes back to this, what I was thinking about when you were talking about our sort of like narrow definition of masculinity. That like as we expanded the definition of femininity, we didn't do anything with the definition of masculinity. I think a similar thing happened as we broadened the possibilities for people of color. We didn't do anything with the definition of whiteness. And I think that there's a real kind of parallel between the story you were telling about masculinity and our understanding of whiteness. And,
I think you're on to something.
but I do think that there's a way in which we have not grappled with what it means to be white in the same way we haven't grappled with what it means to be male, as the definition of the things surrounding whiteness have changed and grown. And I think that makes people really uncomfortable.
Wow.
So I just gotta say, one, thank you for saying that. And it's kind of when things are kind of sitting right in front of you, and then it clicks one day. You just help something click for me, because for the longest time, I think we've all kind of been in spaces where we're like, the term white people is an erasing term, right? How many times have white people say, I'm just white? And we're like, aren't you just white? I mean, you're a living, breathing, sentient human being. You have culture, you have norms, you have cool things that you like to do. There's parts of,
mediocre.
Go to some other country and be like, oh, I'm just white. No, you will have a distinct flavor.
You will.
Right?
You will have a
Or
distinct
lack of flavor. A distinct
lack of flavor. But that's the thing. Even that's a flavor. You know what I'm saying? It's like rice cakes. Some people
That
love
is
those.
a flavor. That is a flavor. Rice cake is
it's like
a flavor.
The crunch. It's a texture. Texture. It's not
More texture than flavor, but sure, yeah.
more texture. but to your point though, man, I had not thought about it, because you're right. During the 60s, during the 50s,
Yeah.
it was a growth in the definition of what being a Black American can be.
Absolutely.
There's a growth in the definition of what a Latino could be. But to then not be able to go through that same exercise on some level, and y'all probably been in these work social equity trainings where you're saying like name cool things that you like about your culture. Black people start going like, bah, 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 bah. And then the Latinos over here like, bah, 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 bah. And then the Korean folks, nah, 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 nah. And then the white people like,
I like all your stuff.
This is mind blowing. This is really an aha.
stuff.
This is a huge aha, Andrew. This is huge.
Yeah.
And there might be, I'm not saying that there's jealousy, but there's a little bit of like, well, I'm cool too. You are, but
I think that the challenge is like the creation of whiteness was created in order to create a hierarchy of human value.
Sure.
Like whiteness at its core is by nature a dehumanizing project. And so it's, we talk about like a healthy white racial identity versus a positive white racial identity. Like whiteness is a problem. And so it's very hard, I think, to kind of thread that needle. But like how do we sort of like hold on to this idea of a pride and a heritage and a tradition of the vast number of white people who participated in emancipation, who participated in the Underground Railroad. Like there are people that we can look back on and fall into without then like reifying the idea of whiteness. And I think that's like that's a tricky thing to do. I don't know that we have great models for it. And I think that's one of the things, similar to the ways we haven't presented great models of masculinity for kids to hold on to. We also haven't presented great ideas of whiteness. And this is how I think we end up with the kind of the white teenage boy falling down the rabbit hole of everybody's telling you that everybody except you is special. And you have nothing to feel special about. And so I'm going to give you this thing to feel special about. But the thing I'm going to give you is white supremacy. The thing I'm going to give you is the KKK. The thing I'm going to give you is, ethno-nationalism is this sort of really toxic version of it.
So with that being the case, because it is, that is so on the nose. With that being the case, one of the things that I think people who are more progressive don't do particularly well is allow multiple things to be true. Oftentimes I feel like, every damn body got to be put through a pH balanced purity test. and so I've answered the question, is it even okay to have a favorite president these days? But one of the ones that I'll cite is George Washington. And then you'll immediately hear George Washington, slave owner. George Washington, hypocrite. George Washington. And I was like, yes. And George Washington could have been a king. He could have been an emperor. Right. Matter of fact, they wanted him to be. And the colossal amount of self-restraint that it takes for a person to literally be sitting at the top of the mountain and to be able to be the unhinged dictator if he wanted to be, that was possible.
Right.
And it takes a colossal amount of, 1, foresight, 2, humility, and 3, wisdom to say, no, not only will I not be, but it is in our best interest to make sure nobody ever is allowed to either.
Right.
This is the model that we're going to set as the first guy out the gate. That allowed us to have quite a bit of precedent that we could build on that empowered us to ultimately have the kinds of things that allowed the civil rights movement to be possible, even under great duress, pushback, and attack, right? Those things are true. Those things are also true.
And he was a slaveholder, and he was a hypocrite, and that is true.
And all those things are true. And that's why, on the flip side, we end up deifying a lot of people too, and we don't go into some of the nuance of their humanity. If we would all embrace just a little bit more humility and understanding of being able to hold things true at the same time, I think it would give white people a better chance to see themselves in a more positive light, because shame ain't helping no damn body. It really is.
It's really not. It's really not. And it's very difficult to see your hero's shadows. It is. Yeah. There are many of our folk, Byron, who have lots of shadows that we would like to ignore. And we do.
And we do ignore them. Yeah, I mean, and I think that's part of the problem too, right? Is like we want either heroes or villains. And if you've got one flaw nowadays, you are a villain regardless. And then we have to ignore all of the ways that our heroes were also flawed. And then people feel like, I want to be a hero, and as soon as I do something wrong, as soon as I say the wrong thing, as soon as I post the wrong thing, now I'm a villain. And then it's sort of like, well, what good is there in trying to be a hero anymore? I may as well just like embrace my villainness.
It's so wild. We're all in this work, and I believe that you all believe in restored justice and all that stuff. And so I believe that, right? And then one time, this boy was really mean to my daughter. I was like, man, you better get don't you ever come around here no more.
You're right.
You're dead to me. You're right.
Of course.
Because it got really personal. It's like, that was over there.
Right.
But then when he got real close to me, I was like, nah.
Right.
Nah. And it really wasn't what he did. It really wasn't that bad.
How old is your daughter?
She just turned 17.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
And I was like, and no boy can be out here mistreating or maybe casually ignoring my daughter.
Treating slightly less than ideal. Whatever, the point is.
Being a 16-year-old boy.
Being a 16-year-old boy.
You better not.
I'll knock you out. All that grace and stuff went right out the window as soon as it got. But to that point, I guess that bringing it full circle, right? Like that's what happens in real life too. Whenever we're talking about us, things that have to do with me and my identity and my people, everything's cool and great until it hits home. And then I'm forced to actually live out the principle.
Right.
Yeah.
That gets a lot harder.
The thing that my black elementary school, I went to almost all black and brown elementary school, what that gave me was the belief that it's not zero sum, was the belief that a shifting definition of blackness did not actually threaten me, that a country in which people of color are more empowered actually is better for everyone because of the relationships that I built, because of the friendships that I had, because of seeing that the risk of retribution is not a real thing to be worried about, that actually like we are all humans, that we actually like crave connection, that we actually want to lift each other up, that like at our base, when we feel supported and when we feel like there is enough, that we actually want to lift everybody up. And it's those relationships. And I think that's where the power of school, where the power of education comes in, where the power of like meaningfully integrated spaces, not just throwing kids together, but actually like building spaces where kids can see their shared humanity, where kids can find that they are actually more alike than different, that's how we create a generation of people who believe that our country is better if we're all better off.
Here's the thing, waiting for integrated communities, we're going to be waiting for a long, long time, economically integrated communities. I think that we can use our schools as a pathway toward that eventual, beautiful, imaginative future. But I think our schools, as the only place where anybody has to go for 13 years of their life, this is the opportunity to create those integrated experiences economically and racially.
Absolutely.
And any strategies that push us further in that direction is a strategy that's worth embracing.
Andrew and I talk a lot about how our modeling these conversations is really important, because you can do these in your affinity groups, but until you do it across difference, it's just theory and good ideas and things that you're reading from books. And so if you do not practice actually engaging in these conversations with people who think differently from you or have a different perspective or will challenge you on something that you have believed to your core, then you just winging it, And
you out here winging it.
And it's cute because you can like be a keyboard killer, and talk about how pure you are until the kid comes knocking on the door and it becomes something personal. And I think what we know to be true specifically around what we're asking our listeners to do is it becomes personal when you decide what school my kids are going to. How much am I actually about that integrated life? How much am I actually about shared resources? And I think that's a lot of what our listeners grapple with, because you feel like I have to give my kid the best opportunities available. And you've been taught that is not at a predominantly Black or brown school. And I just heard from you that your experience at your Black and brown school was necessary for your identity and your wholeness moving forward.
And Val, what happens when you and your Black family are now having to make a decision about, your beautiful Black child?
Yeah. And Andrew excuses it all the time. He was like, look, I can't be mad.
Yeah. But this is why we got to get to systemic solutions. Because if we keep asking everybody to be Martin Luther King and to have his moral compass, and this is why I get so mad whenever somebody is like, I made it out. I was like, yeah, you did. How hard was that?
Right.
Because what you just said sounded very difficult. And yeah, there's probably like 5% of the human population capable of overcoming all of the stuff that you overcame. You're like, well, I did it. Look at you, broke leg. You done lost a finger.
Right.
You made it. Yes.
One of your eyebrows singed off.
One of your eyebrows singed. Good for you.
Limping out.
And also.
Head in a bandage.
And also, everybody should not have to be that strong in order to just thrive.
Right.
You spent a long time at Big Thought. And as far as I understand, the organization is focused on kind of before school, after school, in school, creating opportunities for kids, closing the opportunity gap, creative in the arts, in sports, pouring resources into schools with a particular focus around the creator archetype. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the work of Big Thought and then why creativity was such an important piece of it?
Yeah, Big Thought was about these non-traditional learning spaces. What a wonderful opportunity to use the extra leash that we have, the less rigid, policy-based structure, in order to create experiences that build all the skills that we know really, really matter, but are oftentimes not given the elbow room to be flexed, like problem solving, critical thinking, creative expression, teamwork and collaboration, civics and service engagement, right? The reason why all of that was so important was because we're in a world where, as y'all have seen it, the skills that are being required in work are radically changing so fast. AI is fundamentally changing the world right in front of our very eyes, right? And it used to be, okay, I'm good at math. So?
Not as good as ChatGPT.
Right. So now it's not really a function of do you have the technical skill? The question is, where's your imagination? How can you think creatively about solving a problem? What are the right questions to ask?
Yeah.
Right? That's stuff that honestly, our model of education has not been particularly adept at targeting. But you know what helps? Out of school time experiences, non-traditional learning experiences, learning by doing experiences. That's where you build those skills. And we can codify that, we can measure it, and we need to hold ourselves accountable for it. That's what the creator archetype was designed to do. We created 5 different domains: social, emotional skills building, academics and artistry, design thinking, digital fluency, civics and service. And those are the ones that we need to be building, because quite frankly, we just don't know exactly what the jobs are going to look like by the time today's 5th grader graduates. By the time today's 10th grader gets to workforce. And so we have to be giving them those adaptable skills for whatever the dynamic future looks like. That's why creator archetype was created.
Yeah, and I think that the creator archetype really spoke to me because one of those domains is academics and arts. It's like half of one of the domains is what we spend so much time and energy focused on in our schools, is what we measure schools, is what we hold schools accountable for. And yet you tell me what do we actually need to do for kids? And I look at the creator archetype, I'm like, yes, all of those things. We need kids to know who they are. We need them to have social and emotional skills and a language to be able to communicate with each other. We need kids to be doing arts. We need creativity in the world. We need kids to be generating new ideas, because particularly, talk about the advent of AI, you talk about the ways that education and work is changing. Creativity is not going away, and we have neglected that for so long. Digital literacy, obviously, if our kids need to learn anything, it's how do you actually interact with the ways that our world has been taken over by computers, and particularly this idea around service. How are we then giving back to the world? Because we have such a focus on individuality. We have such a focus on what is the education doing for me, and not what does my education allow me to do for my community and for my world. Those are the things I want my kids to learn. Those are the things that I want them to come away with. And we do a tiny little sliver of those in schools. I mean, schools do all of those things when they're doing things well. But the only thing we seem to measure schools on, the only thing we seem to hold schools accountable for, the only way we say to other parents, this is a good school or this is a bad school, is one tiny sliver of one of those things. So I really appreciate all the work that the Big Thought did around kind of creating these spaces outside of the traditional classroom. And I think right now, in this moment where there's so much policy pressure working against those things, there's so many places, even in progressive, but certainly you look at places like Florida, you look at places like Texas, what the sort of state level mandates are for classroom time are making those things harder and harder and harder to find. It seems like there's real value in this moment in community coming together to say, our kids are in school for 7 hours a day. Where else are they? And how do we create spaces where these other things that are actually important to us can happen?
We really need community right now. We really need community spaces, because in the places where you can't talk about who you are, where you come from, your identity and your culture, we can't do that in these buildings. But you know who can?
The Boys and Girls Club.
Grandma.
Yep.
Boys and Girls Club.
Right.
Yep.
Rec Center right here, or the community center right here.
Yep.
Freedom schools can happen. So when is an after school program, not just after school program? Right now.
Yeah.
But this basically is our entire thesis about how education system should be anyway. It should be inside, outside. It should be live. It should be community centered, community rooted. It should be youth driven and youth informed. Bottom line is, if we can do that, we'll be able to create the kind of children, then young adult, then, eventually the owners of the system themselves, who knows how important it is for us to advance past kind of this stickiness that we're in right now. That's the only way this is going to work. Because as much as I am a bit of a radical, I am not going to advocate that our school district does some things that's going to absolutely result in us losing hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
I can't. Our schools are too important. And they're too important not just for learning, but this is where kids eat. This is where they're safe. This is how we make sure that we keep some of our young people out of gangs and stuff like that. We need our schools. And so I'm not going to do something that's going to jeopardize that. As the trustee of this institution right now, I can't fight that fight like that.
Right.
So what I need is help. And we need community spaces to pick up the baton.
You need that help, and then you need to be Earl Judson in the system, making paths.
Amen to that. That point ain't never learned.
This has been a beautiful conversation. Your career, the things that you have cared about and worked on and fought for, I think are very inspiring. You are clearly a fixer this positive vision of what you want to be that you are running towards, I think has I'm sure had ripples for many, many people, and really grateful for you coming on and sharing your story with us.
Val, sis, Andrew, brother. Yeah.
Thank you for saying yes to, he did not hesitate. I gave him zero context.
Easy.
Val asked, you say yes.
Thank you.
So Val, what'd you think?
There's a lot that resonates with me from this conversation, and I wasn't quite sure where it would go, and we went so many different places, but what is sticking with me is that every gift is an assignment.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that feels important to elevate for our listeners, because I don't always believe people believe they have what it takes to contribute to the world in a way that feels meaningful. And if you have the opportunity in your search of who you are and what motivates you and what inspires you and what energizes you, and you recognize there's a gift there, to then see that as a responsibility feels like a green light to do things that you might have been afraid to do before, right? When you felt like you did not have enough to give. And we joked in the opening about we couldn't run away from this if we tried. And maybe that's why. Maybe we can't, because it is a gift. And we see it as a responsibility to provide a platform to have these conversations and to model in the best way we know how the world that we are trying to create. So I think those words have given me some peace around what it means to show up, how I can show up, for it to not feel like a burden.
I totally agree. And what that makes me think of is also, where he said he takes hope from, which is his imagination. And, it is easy these days to struggle to find hope. But I think that combination of feeling like there are gifts that I have, which means that I have a responsibility to do something with them. And to get motivated to do something with them requires hope, right? Like action requires hope. And part of the struggle right now is, the feeling of hopelessness, I think, is intentional. And to be able to go back and say, okay, where have we come from? What have we already overcome? Who has shed blood and sweat and tears in order to get us to this point? And like Byron said, in many ways, we're in a crisis. In many ways, things are hard. And in the grand scheme of things, it is light work. Like, who are we to say, woe is me, I can't contribute right now? If we have gifts, we therefore have a responsibility. And there is some hope in channeling that into creating a better world. And it may feel like that's a far away place right now in many ways. And many people have been in further away places and contributed and believed and had hope and had gifts and took that as a responsibility to try to advance things.
When you mentioned it seeming like a dark place, I want to take us directly back to Byron's story and how he met his eventual mentor, Earl Johnson. And so even in the times of darkness, there are people that we can look to that can offer a hand in a way that we don't know where that is going to lead. And we also have the ability to be those people as well. And that right there does give me hope, because in his darkest moment, there was someone to say, hey, I'm not throwing you away, or we can be in community, or here's how we will hold each other up. You can rely on me to look out for you in this moment. And you are not going to find those people if you stay isolated alone in your house.
Yep.
So you have to find ways to connect. I absolutely believe in connecting virtually. So if that's where your community is, great. And I have also, again, always admired this in you, that community that you are building, in your neighborhood, at your schools, right? And so because I always worked outside of my immediate neighborhood, it has taken a while to develop that community, but that is also where you will find it. So it can feel dark. It feels darker when you're alone. Get out in community, because that will give you some of that hope that you are seeking.
Yeah. The surefire way to find an Earl Johnson in your life is to try to be an Earl Johnson in somebody else's life. You know, if you feel like you are in need of somebody to believe in you, start by trying to believe in somebody else. As Byron said, like the only way he got another chance was through the grace and the participation and the trust of another person. Going out and finding other people, like you said, you know, virtually if that's where it's at, but any way that you can in person, in real life, and showing people grace and participating in things with people and trusting people is the way we build connections. And those connections are what actually create the strength to overcome challenges.
It's easy to get overwhelmed these days, like super easy for me.
Yep.
And what I have done to like counteract that is to go on a walk. And whenever I'm on a walk, I see trees, I see flowers, I see skies. Even yet recently, I went for a walk in the rain. I stumbled upon a hashtag that I am going to participate in now. I have not done any hashtagging for real in a minute.
Time, yeah.
You know, it's been years at this point, which sounds wild, but it's bloom scrolling, and I was like, you know what? I can add to the bloom scrolling timeline.
I love it.
And today, I passed a flower, and in the flower was a little worker bee, and that worker bee was doing that pollination thing and making sure that there were going to be blooms somewhere else too. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm holding on to. And I hope to hear from our audience, like, what is it that is not only giving you hope, but what are you holding on to that feels real and tangible? Yeah,
definitely let us know. We want to hear that. The other piece from the conversation that I've been thinking about a lot is this sort of, you know, this link between the very narrow definition of masculinity that we still have and the very narrow definition of whiteness that we still have. You know, that Bell Hooks quote that Byron mentioned, where she says, like, we had a revolution, men, you know, where's your revolution?
Yeah.
You know, would love to hear from listeners what sort of resources, who you're listening to around this idea of both masculinity and whiteness, because I do think that is at the root of a lot of the conflict and turmoil we are seeing right now.
In that conversation, like, you opened a door in my mind that I hadn't thought about yet. And it was, you know, we were able to apply it both to masculinity and whiteness. And because I am the beneficiary of a Black Pride revolution, of a woman's right revolution, like, I feel my own sense of expansion in that. Me expanding, my own sense of self expanding does not squeeze anyone else out. And so I'm always curious about why that feels like a threat, you know, and that we have to squeeze people down to have a sense of self. And so if we can figure out how not to do that, I think that'll go a long way too.
Yeah. Listeners, how are you thinking about how our definitions of masculinity, our definitions of whiteness serve to divide us, serve to limit our potential, and serve to make it harder to connect with people? Shoot us a voice memo, speakpipe.com/integrated-schools, or send us an email, podcast@integratedschools.org. Just record a voice memo on your phone and email it to us, or just hit us up on social media at Integrated Schools. We would love to hear how you're grappling with that.
All right, for anybody watching our video today, I have on my favorite Integrated Schools hoodie.
That's right.
Public Schools Save Democracy. You could twin with me and Andrew at any point. You can go to our website, click on the link that says store, and you will see multiple options and colors. I always get compliments when I wear this hoodie.
That's right.
Also, while you're on our website, go ahead and check out that red donate button, because we could use all the support that we can get in order to make this podcast come to life. We are grateful for your donations.
Absolutely, yes. And if you want to see Val's shirt and you are just listening, all our episodes now are up on YouTube. We would appreciate it if you'd go over to YouTube and subscribe to the show. Helps the algorithm feed us to more people. There's lots of negativity being fed to people on YouTube. And so the more positivity we can spread, the better. You liking and following the show on YouTube would go a long way towards that. We'd be grateful for it.
That's right.
Well, Val, as always, thank you for bringing your friends on the show. You never miss. Byron really blew my mind in a lot of ways. It was a great conversation. Grateful for it, and grateful to be in this with you as I try to know better and do better.
Until next time.